The tungsten core exits the muzzle at 1,200 meters per second. 3 aluminum petals spin away into the French hedgerow. What remains is impossibly small, a 7-pound dart flying at velocities that make steel shatter. Inside the Panther tank, 300 meters away, the driver doesn't hear it coming. The sub-caliber projectile strikes the glacis plate at 55 degrees. At this angle, conventional rounds ricochet. The laws of deflection should save the crew. Sloped armor, Germany's geometric masterpiece, the principle that won them France, that made their tanks nearly invulnerable from the front. Should. The tungsten doesn't care about angles. At impact velocity, metal stops behaving like metal. It flows. The Panther's 80mm plate, angled to present 140mm effective thickness, might as well be butter. The penetrator cores through, fragmenting only after entry. Inside, the crew has 0.3 seconds to understand what's happening. They never do. July 1944, Normandy. The Sherman Firefly crew reloads, sliding another APDS round into the breach. Their 17-pounder gun cost Britain 2 years of desperate engineering, countless failed prototypes, and the realization that traditional ballistics had reached their limit. The Germans had changed warfare with slope. Britain changed it back with speed. This is the story of the round that made geometry irrelevant, how 2 designers at Armaments Research Department turned physics into a weapon, how a tiny tungsten dart traveling faster than a rifle bullet rewrote the rules of armored warfare. The Panther's turret doesn't traverse, its crew doesn't bail out. Because they're already dead, killed by math moving at 3,900 feet per second. Stay with this story, it's about to get technical, and that's where it gets beautiful.
January 1943, North Africa. British gunners aim their 6-pounder anti-tank guns at the new German Tiger I. They fire. The 57mm rounds bounce off at 800 meters like stones skipping water. 2 crews die before they understand the problem. The Germans had cracked a fundamental equation. Thickness plus angle equals survival. The Panther tank's glacis, 80mm of face-hardened steel set at 55 degrees, presented 140mm effective thickness. The Tiger's frontal armor laughed at anything Britain could field. Every engagement became a flanking exercise, a desperate hunt for side shots. Churchill tanks burned, Cromwells brewed up. British tank crews developed a morbid nickname for their Shermans, Ronsons. They light first time. At Armaments Research Department in Woolwich, the numbers told a brutal story. Steel armor-piercing rounds shattered above 850 meters per second. Make them heavier, they travel slower. Make them faster, they disintegrate on impact. The energy equation appeared insoluble. German engineers had weaponized geometry itself. 2 men inherited this nightmare. Perlmutter, a Belgian who'd fled the Brandt Company ahead of the Wehrmacht, and Kapok, a British metallurgist. Between them, they knew 3 things. First, tungsten carbide could withstand velocities that destroyed steel. Second, a lighter projectile accelerated faster in the bore. Third, the French had experimented with sabots, wooden shoes that fell away after firing centuries ago with cannonballs. What if you combined all 3? The concept seemed simple. Wrap a small tungsten core in a lightweight aluminum shell. Fire it at impossible velocity. Let the shell fall away. What remains is a hyper-dense penetrator moving faster than any full-caliber round could dream of. Simple, except nothing about it worked. Not at first. Not for 18 months of failures. By mid-1943, every British tank commander knew the score. Face a Panther frontally, you die. The question wasn't if but when Germany's armored advantage would decide the war.
The workshop at Woolwich smelled of scorched aluminum and failure. Test firing number 47. The aluminum saber, French for clog, was supposed to separate cleanly after exit. Instead, it tumbled, taking the tungsten core with it. The round struck the test plate sideways. Useless. Perlmutter adjusted the tolerance, 0.005 inches tighter fit between core and carrier. Metal screamed against metal in the proof range. The air tasted of cordite in desperation. Each test consumed tungsten they didn't have, time they couldn't afford. Germany was fielding Panthers at a rate of 300 per month. Britain was fielding excuses. The core problem was spin. Rifling imparts rotation for stability. Full-caliber rounds gripped the barrel's grooves, but their sub-caliber core sat inside the saber, separated by a critical gap. Too loose, the rifling spin never transferred. The core wobbled in flight, accuracy suffered. Too tight, and the saber wouldn't discard. Test 61, Kapok proposed a three pedal design. Aluminum pedals would grip the rifling, transfer spin, then shear away on exit. Simple mechanical principle. Except the shearing forces had to be precisely calibrated. Too much tension, the pedals wouldn't release. Too little, they'd release in bore, potentially destroying the gun. The solution came at 0300 on a Tuesday. Serrated grooves at the pedal-to-base junction. The setback forces during firing would pre-fracture them. Outside the barrel, spin and air resistance would complete the separation. They fired at dawn. The saber discarded perfectly. The tungsten core, just 3.5 kilograms of machine precision, struck the test plate at 1,200 meters per second, through 100 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. Clean entry hole, catastrophic spalling on the far side. Permutter lit a cigarette with shaking hands. They'd just doubled the effective range of every British anti-tank gun. Maybe. If they could manufacture it. If crews could be trained. If the tungsten supply held.
June 1944. The first APDS rounds arrive in Normandy not as a flood, but as a trickle. 6 rounds per Firefly. Crews are told to save them for hardened targets only. Trooper David Wilson, 4th County of London Yeomanry, loads his first discarding sabot round and thinks it looks wrong, too light. The shell is mostly air and aluminum. This is supposed to kill a tiger? The answer comes 3 days later. A panther appears through the hedgerow at 400 meters, hull down, glacis angled. Standard doctrine, don't engage frontally, flank it, call for infantry support, pray. Wilson's gunner doesn't flank, he fires APDS. The round exits at 3,900 feet per second. The sabot petals spin away in a distinctive spiral, 3 aluminum flowers blooming in milliseconds. The tungsten penetrator impacts before the sound of the shot reaches the Panther crew. It goes through the glacis that was supposed to be invulnerable, through the driver's compartment, through the rear plate. The Panther's engine catches fire from the inside. Wilson's immediate thought, Jesus Christ, what did we just fire? But the weapon reveals its flaws immediately. Second shot, 600 meters, APDS again. The round misses completely. Dirt erupts 40 feet left of target. No visible impact to spot the fall of shot. The subcaliber core kicks up such a tiny dust cloud that fire correction becomes guesswork. Third shot, APCBC, standard ammunition, miss. Fourth shot, hit, Panther burns. The after-action report notes, APDS effective at penetration. Accuracy questionable beyond 500 yards. Crews report difficulty observing strike. What nobody writes down, we just changed tank warfare, and nobody's noticed yet. The round that makes angles irrelevant exists, it just needs refinement. And combat data, which means more dead Panthers. More dead Germans who thought sloped armor was their salvation.
By August 1944, intelligence officers are seeing patterns. German tank tactics shift. Panthers no longer advance hull down with impunity. Tiger commanders hang back, choosing longer engagement ranges. Somebody's learning. The learning comes from autopsies. Wehrmacht recovery teams examining knocked-out Panthers find impossible holes, entry wounds through glacis plates that should deflect anything. The penetration mechanics don't match any known Allied round. They're pulling tungsten fragments from interior spalling. At Falaise, the equation changes permanently. British anti-tank regiments now deploy 17-pounders in overwatching positions, specifically hunting heavies. The APDS allocation increases to 12 rounds per gun. Not abundance, but enough. Firefly Shermans become priority targets for German gunners who've learned the hard way that specific Sherman variant can kill you from the front. Production capacity becomes the bottleneck. Tungsten supply, never generous, determines how many rounds Britain can field. Each APDS projectile requires 3.5 kilograms of centered tungsten carbide, material better suited for machine tools and armor-piercing bombs. The Ministry of Supply makes calculations. How many dead Panthers equals how many delayed bomber operations? The answer reshapes doctrine. Infantry anti-tank platoons receive priority. One 17-pounder with APDS can hold a crossroads against a panzer battalion. That's not hyperbole. That's verified at Arnhem, where single guns knock out multiple Tigers before being overrun. German procurement officers note a problem. Their advantage in armored warfare, built on superior metallurgy and slope design, is evaporating, not through superior Allied tanks, through superior Allied ammunition. At Krupp, engineers are tasked with creating effective APDS. They fail. Germany lacks tungsten. Without tungsten, you can't create the dense penetrator. Without the penetrator, you can't match British penetration. By October, the strategic balance is inverted. German tanks survive through evasion, not protection. Sloped armor, the principle that saved them at Kursk, now barely matters. Physics doesn't care about angles when velocity reaches hydrodynamic thresholds.
December 1944, Ardennes. The Firefly's engine idles at 70 meters from the crossroads. Inside, the crew waits, cold so bitter their breath freezes on the gun sight. Movement, track noise, the distinctive diesel growl of a panther. Contact front, the commander whispers into the intercom. Panther, 200 meters. The gunner's hands are numb. He can barely feel the traverse. The panther emerges through snow, glacis angled perfectly, presenting maximum effective thickness. Textbook positioning. 2 years ago, this would be suicide to engage frontally. APDS loaded. The round weighs almost nothing compared to standard ammunition. In the breech, it looks like a toy. The tungsten core is invisible inside its aluminum carrier. Trust the engineers. Trust the math. The Panther's turret begins to traverse. They've been spotted. Fire. The world becomes noise and recoil. The gun slams backward against its mounting. Through the viewport, 3 aluminum petals spiral away like dying birds. The sabot separation creates a distinctive visual, something crews learn to recognize, to trust. Impact. The tungsten core strikes the Panther's glacis at the weld line. At 1200 meters per second, material science becomes fluid dynamics. The penetrator doesn't care about slope angle, doesn't care about face hardening, doesn't care that the plate is rated for 140 millimeters effective thickness. It punches through like the armor isn't there. Inside the Panther, the driver's last thought is confused. They weren't even hit frontally in a vulnerable spot. This shouldn't be possible. The tungsten core fragments after penetration. Secondary fragmentation tears through the fighting compartment. The Panther coasts to a stop, turret frozen mid-traverse. The Firefly's loader is already loading APCBC. APDS are too precious to waste on a confirmed kill. Target destroyed. Scanning for... Second contact. Tiger, 400 meters. The loader's hands shake. APDS or standard. How many rounds do they have left? The math becomes survival. And the Tiger is already firing.
The physics behind APDS defeating sloped armor requires understanding material behavior at extreme velocities. Traditional armor piercing relies on a projectile maintaining structural integrity while transferring kinetic energy. APDS operates in a different regime entirely. At 1200 meters per second impact velocity, metals transition to hydrodynamic behavior. The tungsten carbide penetrator, density 15.6 grams per cubic centimeter, encounters armor steel at 7.85 grams per centimeter cubed. The density ratio becomes critical. The penetrator essentially flows through the target, like high-velocity fluid through lesser-density fluid. Slope angle, which normally forces deflection, becomes nearly irrelevant above threshold velocities. Here's why. The penetrator's kinetic energy per unit area, sectional density times velocity squared, exceeds the target material's yield strength by orders of magnitude. The armor doesn't deflect the round. It fails locally, exactly at impact point. The tungsten core measures approximately 40 millimeters diameter, 200 millimeters length to diameter ratio of 5:1. This geometry concentrates pressure over minimal area while maintaining sufficient mass for deep penetration. The full 17-pounder round weighs 17 pounds. The APDS subprojectile, just 7.7 pounds, but it carries 60% more kinetic energy on target due to velocity advantage. Muzzle velocity, 3,950 feet per second versus 2,900 feet per second for conventional APCBC rounds. Energy equation, 1/2 mass times velocity squared. Despite lower mass, the velocity advantage delivers 20% more kinetic energy concentrated into half the impact area. The aluminum sabot, 3 or 4 kettles depending on variant, weighs mere ounces. Its purpose, provide full bore diameter for efficient propellant gas expansion while adding negligible mass. The petals must transfer rifling spin to the core despite a small clearance gap. Too tight, they won't discard. Too loose, accuracy suffers. Some sources report penetration of 256 millimeters at 500 meters against vertical armor. Others cite 187 millimeters at 30-degree obliquity. The discrepancy reflects testing criteria differences. British versus German standards, different Brinell hardness ratings, different success definitions. What's undisputed, the round could defeat any German tank's frontal armor at combat ranges, sloped or not.
Sergeant James Crawford, 2nd Northamptonshire Yeomanry, writes home in September 1944. The new ammunition makes the gun sound different, sharper, like the air itself is tearing. The Jerry tanks burn the same, but our lads are less afraid now. That's the difference. We're not terrified of Panthers anymore. The psychological shift cuts both directions. British crews develop confidence bordering on overconfidence. APDS creates a dangerous assumption. Frontal engagement is survivable. It isn't. The round penetrates armor, but German guns still penetrate Sherman armor just as easily. The Firefly's advantage is offensive, not defensive. Crews learned brutal lessons. Trooper Michael Holmes describes his first APDS miss. "You can't see where it lands. The dirt puff is tiny." We fired 3 rounds at a Tiger before we realized we were missing left. By then, he'd seen our muzzle flashes. We lost the driver and bow gunner before we could reverse out. The cognitive burden is real. APDS for harded targets, APCBCC for reliable hits, HE for soft targets. Split-second decisions while being shot at. Load the wrong round, you die. Load APDS, miss due to accuracy issues, you die. Second guess yourself, you die. German tank crews develop their own terror. Letters recovered from knocked-out Panthers reveal obsessive focus on the Shermans with the long gun. One tanker writes, "They can kill us from the front now. Nowhere is safe. The angled armor that saved us at Kursk means nothing against the tungsten rounds." The material cost extends beyond tungsten. APDS rounds foul barrels faster. The subcaliber design creates uneven pressure distribution. Barrel life decreases. Crews notice the gun's accuracy degrading after 100 APDS firings. In combat, this means uncertainty compounding uncertainty. And there's the weight of selection. Each Firefly carries limited APDS. Every shot fired is a choice to deplete a finite resource. The loader's hands shake not from fear but from decision fatigue. Fire now and maybe miss, or wait for perfect shot geometry and maybe get killed first. The tungsten doesn't judge, but the war does.
German intelligence designates APDS as Hartkernmunition mit Treibspiegel, hardcore ammunition with sabot. Wehrmacht technical teams disassemble captured British ammunition. They understand the principle immediately. Implementing it proves impossible. Germany's tungsten supply, never abundant, was exhausted by competing priorities: machine tools, U-boat armor penetrators, aircraft parts. Creating APDS required sintered tungsten carbide at 3.5 kilograms per round. The numbers didn't work. Panthers continued production at 300 per month. Creating sufficient tungsten stocks for defensive ammunition would require shutting down other programs. Instead, German engineers pursued alternative solutions. Some advocated increasing armor thickness, the Königstiger's 150mm frontal plate. Others pushed reactive concepts, spaced armor, Scherzen side plates, anything to disrupt the penetrator's physics. None fully negated APDS, but they increased survival chances. Tactical adaptations proved more effective. Panther commanders learned to avoid frontal engagements with Fireflies specifically. Recognition training emphasized the Firefly's distinct profile, longer barrel, different muzzle brake, often positioned at the rear of Sherman platoons. Soviet intelligence officers examined APDS captured at Partzen. They recognized its potential but faced identical tungsten constraints. Russian APDS development lagged until post-war, when captured German and British technical documents accelerated their programs. The BR-412D round for the 122mm gun represented their first successful implementation, 1950. American ordnance officers tested British APDS extensively. The US Army declined adoption for complex reasons: not invented here syndrome, existing 76mm and 90mm programs, confidence in their own HVAP, high-velocity armor-piercing composite rigid rounds. This decision proved costly during the Battle of the Bulge, where American tankers faced Panthers and Tigers with inferior ammunition. Some British units reported German tanks deploying smoke more aggressively, obscuring firing lanes before exposure. Others noted Panthers reversing immediately after firing, denying British gunners time for follow-up APDS shots. Adaptation versus counter-adaptation, the eternal arms race compressed into months. What couldn't be counted? Pure kinetic energy. No amount of tactical adaptation defeats physics traveling at 1,200 meters per second.
May 1945. A Tiger II sits abandoned near Bremen, its turret traversed to face an empty street. British investigators examine McLeish's plate. 2 perfectly circular holes, 40mm diameter. Entry wounds. The 180mm frontal armor, sloped at 50 degrees, presenting 235mm effective thickness, was supposed to be impervious to any Allied gun. Supposed to be. The APDS rounds created wounds traditional ballistics couldn't explain. This wasn't deflection failure or weld weakness. This was complete negation of the geometric advantage Germany had built their armored doctrine around. The legacy extends far beyond 1945. Modern armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot, APFSDS, the primary anti-tank round of every main battle tank today, descends directly from Perlmutter and Koppach's work. The principle remains identical:
small, dense penetrator wrapped in discarding carrier, fired at extreme velocity. Modern penetrators use depleted uranium or advanced tungsten alloys, achieve 1,700 meters per second, penetrate 700 millimeters of armor equivalent. But the physics? Unchanged since 1944. The M1 Abrams, Leopard 2, Challenger 2, every modern tank fires APDS's evolutionary descendant. The sabot concept that seemed radical in wartime Britain became fundamental to armored warfare. Sloped armor didn't disappear, modern tanks still employ angular design, but it's now just one variable in a complex equation that includes composite materials, reactive armor, and active protection systems. The human cost gets lost in technical specifications. Each APDS round fired represented a crew member loading under fire, a gunner compensating for accuracy quirks, a commander deciding between scarce tungsten and more reliable conventional rounds. The statistics, thousands of German tanks destroyed, obscure the individual terror of facing Panther armor with experimental ammunition. But the strategic impact is undeniable. Britain entered the war unable to defeat German heavy armor frontally. By 1945, their worst tanks could kill Germany's best, not through superior design, through superior physics. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources.